Here we go. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon on a beautiful Saturday in sunny New Jersey is where I am. Joining you for the first, we hope, annual 2022 Virtual Global Grief Conference. I am Claire Schwartz. I am the owner and founder of Miriam's Well Healing, and you can healyourgrief.com. And I'm very happy to join you today. Very honored to be part of this really extraordinary worldwide event. And the title of my class today is Solving the Riddle of Grief and Trauma Healing. What makes it so hard, and how to create more ease in this process that can really upend your life in so many ways. How do you find your way out? What are the keys? What really works? So that's what I'm talking about today. And I'm going to be going back and forth between my lovely PowerPoint. Here's more information about me, and I'll also have this up at the end so you can find me and all of my particulars and everything that I do on the interwebs and through lots of different means of contact. So I wanted to cover a couple of technical bits right at the get-go. I can see my lovely collaborators on the screen. And just to let everybody know that this is being recorded, so I'm supposed to let everybody be aware of that. And if you are coming to us live on Facebook or on YouTube or on Twitch, LinkedIn, any of the other live streams that I missed, you can comment in the live comment section, and we will see it here on StreamYard, and you can be part of this discussion, and then I encourage you to do so. This is an interactive workshop, so please participate and ask questions, pipe in whenever you like. This event was founded by the magnificent folks at Memories of Us. Tony Lynch is the founder of that. He is the brains and heart behind this project, and we are incredibly grateful for all of his efforts and all of his service. Truly an extraordinary individual. He focuses on grief processing for men, which is greatly needed, and he has a wonderful podcast that I urge you to check out. And also by Unplug Grief Ministries. And we are backed up on the tech end by the guys at Chicken Fox Productions. That's Nate and Josh, and I'm not sure who else is back there today, but hi guys. Thanks for holding up the backbone of this amazing presentation. So I'd like to just briefly introduce my lovely colleagues there. You see my friend and colleague, Kathy Kwesnick. She is a social worker and has a huge history with this topic. She works for United Way, and she also ran a bereavement group for, I believe, a decade or more. Kathy, yep, 10 years, yep. So we are grateful for all of her insight and perspective, and for hopping on Saturday. And so welcome, Miss Kathy. Do you want to say hello real quick and unmute yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Claire. Thank you so much. Appreciate you introducing me. And as Claire said, I am Kathy Klosnick, and I am a social worker by trade, and I am the director of United in Care at United Way of Northern New Jersey, which is an initiative that provides affordable quality childcare to everybody in our community. And as Claire said, I also have many years of experience in bereavement facilitation, and have done that work over the past 10 years or so, and have my own personal journey with grief, having lost my spouse over 20 years ago, and having journeyed through a stage 4 cancer battle. I certainly have some insight into this topic, so I'm so happy everybody is here today, and looking forward to the webinar.
Awesome, thank you. She's a powerhouse. Don't mess with her. And you also see on the screen my dear friend Jenny Diltz, who is the grieving coach. She's the grieving coach. And so she's out on the West Coast. So you have a West Coast perspective online today too. And I did her event yesterday, and she's hopping onto mine today. So I love partnering with her and looking forward to her insights. Jenny, did you want to pop on for a sec?
Sure. I'm out in sunny California enjoying the beautiful birds and weather and springtime goodness. And personality-wise, I belong in California. I'm kind of the go with the flow, chill, easygoing, fun-loving grief coach. And often when we think of grief, we don't think of fun-loving and laughter and goodness, but I do. I feel passionate about grief and consider grief as one of my best friends. And I help others who want to develop a positive relationship with grief through many ways. One of those is one-to-one coaching, where we explore grief in our own way, whatever that looks like for you. And I also do events and workshops, like Claire said. I was on yesterday in a workshop called "What to Do When You Don't Do Grief," and we had a lot of fun in that one and exploring what other options we have. And I also host the podcast Share Your Story, Exploring Humanity One Heart at a Time. And I was privileged to have Claire on my show as a guest on that. So you can check it out on my website, grievingcoach.com, or wherever you find podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you, Miss Jenny. So I just want to give you guys a general outline of today. I'm going to talk just a wee bit about my own story, because I think it's important to know where folks are coming from. Authenticity is vital to this process. People really want to know that you get it, that you've been where they are. So that's why I talk about that. And then I want to talk a bit about why is it so tough? Grief is universal. Trauma is nearly universal. We all have things that happen in life that we don't plan for, and they knock you off your game. They can knock you off your feet, and they can wipe you out completely. It's a universal experience, and yet there's so many obstacles that get in our way to our healing, to even get to the door, to open the door of healing. So I have two major categories for that today. There are a whole bunch of challenges that we have in our own psyches and our own ways of thinking before we even get to the point of asking for help. And the solution that I've designed for that is called The Pyramid of Grief and Trauma Healing. And I have some lovely graphics and a lot of slides to share with you today. So we're going to walk through the 5 steps that I identify for those in the order that they go in. And then once we decide, okay, I'm ready to ask for help, what are the things that need to be in place that make that help a success? Because there's this stumbling block that we often have that, oh, I'm asking for help, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be, but sometimes that fit doesn't work. Why is that? And what are the things that we can look for so that we don't have to try 5, 6, 8, 10 times, as a lot of folks do, as I certainly did, before we find the right equation for our actual healing? There will be some time for individual stories. Like I said, participation is encouraged. So hop on in the comments, ask whatever you would like. And then I'll have a special offer at the end for a program that I am doing that I'm very excited about. So I hope everybody sticks around for that. So I'm just going to get a wee bit, click please, there we go, into my story and my why. Not the entire saga, because that would take a while. But the big catalyst for me reinventing myself was the loss of my mother. This is my mommy. And she and I had a very fraught relationship. And yet the older I get, I am her child. And, nature girl, rebel, creative, talks a lot. That would be her and that would be me. So despite the fact that she and I were parted many, many years ago, I have grown into that space. But my grief and trauma started long before that. I started having losses when I was very small, and my trauma started very early. I always give the short list: violence, abuse, neglect, trauma. I said trauma. Violence, abuse, neglect, rape, cancer is my top 5. And there's a whole bunch of little things in between that left me fairly unable to deal with life and myself. Had no idea who I was. My identity was completely wrapped up in trying to survive the things that were put in my path. I call that period of my life the dark ugly. And if you had known where I was back then, you would be surprised that I am still here. And I am beyond grateful every day that I am. But I got here because I worked really hard at it. And I continue to work hard at it. Because now I've learned a thing or two about how to do that. And so that is my ethos for making sure that as many of you as possible find your way out of your dark ugly and into the light. Because I 100% believe that this journey is doable. But we need to get certain things out of our way, and we need to have certain tools in place to make sure that that is more doable for more people. So that's what I'm talking about today. So I'm just going to go to the question: why is grief and trauma healing so bloody hard? It is highly emotional, is one reason. It can come as such a shock. So often these things come out of the blue. That's how I lost actually both my parents. I lost my mother. It was a phone call at midnight. And in that instant, my world changed permanently. So it's the shock sometimes, but it's also the emotions get so cranked up so we can't really see clearly. And the psyche does a lot of things to protect us. So it will numb you out so that the full weight of the emotion won't land quite so hard on you. But what happens in the midst of all of that is you're still feeling all of the emotions, but you're also completely numb at the exact same time. And I have had that description in my head for a long time, and I've presented that to quite a few grievers who have had trouble explaining what that moment is like. that you're feeling every emotion that there is, and yet you are numb at the same time. So those two things don't seem like they'll be side by side, but they are. And my slides are having some sort of hernia. Sorry about that. So in the midst of all of that, of course, we don't know how to feel or what to do because of the numbing out, this over emotion and the numbing out put together. And we also don't know who to ask because there's so much misinformation out there, and we're going to talk about all of that. We get gaslit, we get dismissed, we get hit with 17 kinds of shoulds or shouldn'ts about how to manage. So we feel helpless and we feel stuck. And this is what I want to try to unstick. And we're taught so many of the wrong things about what we need and how to live through it all. It gets very heavy and confusing. Kathy, Jenny, I just want to ask, does either of you want to pipe in on any of that from your experiences, either personally or professionally? Does this ring true in terms of how hard this stuff is? Just unmute, pop right in.
Yeah, I have to say, I totally, completely resonate with the phone call changes everything, and how that that's so true. That, you know, you're one person 1 minute and one phone call, and you're someone else the next minute, and you don't know who that person is. You don't know how to navigate as this new person, and everybody's telling you, you should be this, you should be doing that, you should be doing, and you don't even know who this new person is. So that really resonated with me.
Yeah, and I can imagine for something like your diagnosis, you probably got that by a phone call, right? And then you're like, all of a sudden,
that was exactly it. Yep.
I'm a cancer patient. What?
Exactly. 1 minute you're going, I don't have cancer. There's no way. I'm healthy. I'm a vegetarian. I have cancer. Okay, now what do we do? How do we do that? And, you know, and the answer is, okay, come into the office next Monday and we'll talk about it. Well, you know, that gives you a lot of time to try to figure out, like, oh my gosh, you Google everything and, you know, you're on death's door the next day. So that is just such a true statement.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And oh, by the way, can we cut your skull open? I can't even imagine what that conversation is like. I mean, talk about trauma. It's a tangle of grief and trauma for something like that. I can't even.
Right.
Imagine.
You're one person. You're a healthy person 1 minute, and then you're having brain surgery the next day. So yeah, the surrealness of that is you can't even explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. Mind blowing comes to mind. Yeah. Actually, that's literally mind blowing.
Mind blowing.
Brain blowing. Yes. But you're still here. You're still here.
I'm still here. 4 years later, I'm
still here. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Jenny, did you want to add something or?
So I haven't had any of the fun experiences of cancer or like a parent's death or anything. My kids get death. I haven't experienced any of those. So I get to learn from everybody else's stories. But in doing so, I get bombarded with shoulds and shouldn'ts and expectations and everybody else's story, so that I'm constantly comparing myself. Oh, but I didn't experience that. Oh, but they did it this way. Oh, I need to do it this way. And so for me, my biggest loss is myself.
Yeah.
And it's been that way for my whole life. And now doing grief work, that's where I'm starting to figure out who I am as me.
Yeah.
And it's processing all of the losses of myself and all of the repeat losses of myself. Even now as a grief coach. Oh, they're doing it that way. They're doing it that way. Oh, look, there's another shiny thing. And I want to follow all those shiny things, but it's not necessarily me.
Yeah.
And so I lose myself over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And so and this is one of the hallmarks of the healing process. Your you moves and keeps moving because as Kathy so wisely said, your identity changes. When you lose a parent, your identity changes. When you change jobs, in your case, when you have kids, and you have little kids. And so, it's a constant process of reinvention. And it's the skills that we learn from those reinventions that will serve you for the rest of your life, regardless of what you go through. It does not mean that you're not going to be sad or have pain in the future, but it does mean you will have the tools and resources to deal with it better than just staying stuck and shutting down. So that's what my aim with all of this, as someone who's been through a lot of stuff, is I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn about how to guide folks through that, so that more people are less stuck. So I wanted to get to the challenges that we face before we even start. One piece is, and there's more that are not on the slide, but that the loss or trauma was years ago, and it kind of doesn't matter, because whether it was 5 days ago or 5 years ago, I've had folks come to me 10, 15, 20 years after the fact. But if there is no healing, that process stops. And you can pick it right back up like it was yesterday, and the challenges will still be the same. And there's so many folks who are just afraid to start because of so many things that we get told. Nothing will help. We tell ourselves sometimes, I don't want to heal because that means I have to accept what's happened. And leaning into that truth is just too painful. And yet leaning in is where the healing comes. So there has to be a resolution for that. People get frightened of their emotions, either because they're so powerful or because they are upsetting to someone close to them. So how do you express your own emotions if someone nearby is saying, you shouldn't do that, or don't feel that, or that's too much, you're being too much, you're being over dramatic, etc. And then there's the piece that I call lumpy legacies, which is the misunderstanding that when you lose someone, I'm going to specifically talk about grief for a moment. When you lose someone, most of the quote unquote grief industry is geared towards the loss of a beloved person, someone who is very dear to you that you don't know how you're going to live without. But that's not always the case, because humans are complicated. Relationships are complicated. Friends are complicated. Families are very complicated. So there might be a very multifaceted relationship that has to be taken apart and dealt with and processed that's connected to that loss. There's not always a whole lot of room for that. The assumption is you've lost a loved one, but that's not always the case. So for all of these reasons, all of these things are flying through your head right at the beginning. And so what do I do? Well, let's clear away some of that, because I have created some of that, some of those solutions in the pyramid of grief and trauma healing, to clear away the unhelpful thoughts and ideas, as well as the cultural barriers that get in our way. So here's my cute little graphic, which I cannot take credit for because I stink at this sort of thing. But I really feel like this is the order in which the process needs to happen. So I'm going to take these one by one and deal with each specific thing. The first key, obviously, is recognizing that there's a problem. And most of the ways that happens are there's a light bulb that goes off. You recognize something. Because very often we tend to bury our suffering because we are told, just get back to work, largely because most folks only get 3 days of bereavement from their employer, which is ridiculous. And the loss never gets dealt with. Of course, if we're talking about trauma, then we're talking about something that's lifelong, and or it can come from a specific incident. It could be wrapped up in a loss. Grief and trauma are sort of first cousins. So but for whatever reason, you may have discovered that your personality has changed. Maybe you're irritable. Maybe you don't sleep very well. Maybe you're making mistakes at work. Maybe you don't enjoy the things that you used to enjoy. Maybe someone close to you says, you seem different or odd or on edge, or you're holding something back, and they say, so what's up with that? And you may not be aware that it comes from the loss, or it comes from the trauma that's never been healed. It's also very common that your emotional compass is stuck, that you're sort of meandering around in a haze, an emotional haze. There's a sort of a thin veil over your emotions where everything is a little bit gray. And I see this so often. You start to have health issues. Or maybe you've had health issues for years and you've never aligned that with the emotional stuff that's never been healed. But there's often right underneath that tension, that cortisol cascade, that sleep deprivation, the stress, migraines, tummy issues, teeth grinding, pains. All of your pain can be magnified if you have emotional things in the background. And a real red flag is repeated accidents, car accidents. Or it could be tripping in your house, but very often I see a pattern of car accidents where your attention is off, or you're distracted, or your timing is off, and there's a big red flag. And these are all, hey, this has got to stop. This has got to stop. I have to do something. So that leads us to the desire to change. That light bulb goes on where you just know this can't go on, because health issues are going to demand your attention. Sometimes legal issues are going to demand your attention. So the first piece is recognizing that something is wrong. And the second piece is the desire to actually make a change. And sometimes it comes from someone close to you who is actually going to have the connection and compassion to sit you down and go, hi, are you okay? Because you seem kind of off and you seem upset. I'm not sure what it is. Do you need to talk? And have you thought about going for some help? I'm just going to ask my lovely collaborators how these things resonate, and any of these push any buttons for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a dear friend many years ago who also lost her spouse, and she lost her spouse young, and it was unfortunately to suicide. And she's my best friend. She's been my best friend for years. And the first year after her husband passed, she spent all her time going on trips. She was constantly booking trips, going on trips, going to Amsterdam, going to California, going. And I just saw her really spinning out of control. And I knew at that point nothing about grief. I had not lost my husband yet. I had not had my cancer journey. I just could see from my perspective that she was really grasping for help and didn't know where to get it. And so I said to her, hey, you know what? Our church has a support group. It's a grief group. Would you like to go? I'll go with you. And I talked to the woman at the time who was facilitating the group, and and I gave her the information. And so she wasn't at the point when it first happened to reach out for help, and I think she knew she needed help, but the only way she could fill the void was to run and to try to fill all her time so she didn't have to think about it. And so that was really my first introduction to grief work when I went along with her. to the to the support group and found out that, gosh, what she was doing is perfectly normal, and is okay, but that she recognized she wanted to change at that point as well.
Yeah, exactly. So saying that this is a normal, quote unquote normal, I mean, none of this feels normal, right? But it is an understandable response, but it's also, you're not stuck with that, right? And the running is very, very common. I've seen folks literally go running. They just, every day they decide they're just going to go run. And they're like, yeah, I'm good. I've gotten it all out and I put it all out on the street and I'm pushing myself, and until they realize that there's more of an emotional thing happening.
Mm-hmm.
But so, yeah, that's the running is so interesting. Yeah, but traveling might look like, oh, she's having a great time. Well, I don't know.
Well, that's what's right. From the outside world, people are like, oh, she's really gotten over it really well. She's coping. Look at her. She's having a good time. And I knew, because I knew her, that no, she was not having she was having a good time on the surface, but but not on the, not really. She was running from the pain. She wasn't dealing with it, and she just wasn't ready. And I think that, your point about when you come to grief work, facilitating so many support groups, we had folks who had losses 20, 30 years ago who had never talked about them, never,
Yes.
and came to our group and still couldn't talk. When we would do the let's introduce ourselves thing, they would not be able to say who their person was, even though they lost them 25 years ago, because they had never addressed it. So you're absolutely right. What it could be, it happened yesterday or it happened 20 years ago. If you didn't do the work, you're not going to be able to process it.
Yeah, exactly. And the processing is the goal, right? So, and a lot of things can take the place of that. And as you said, it can be 10 years, 20 years, a lifetime. But by that time, there may be many other losses accumulated. So there can be one that sort of plops you over the edge where you say, oh my, yeah, I need help because I can't.
Yes, that's really true. The one particular person I'm thinking of, it was the loss of her cat that brought her to the group. But she had lost her spouse, she had lost her mom, she had lost all these other people, but it was the cat that finally brought her to the group. But then when it started to, she started to really start to speak, you realize there was so much more behind it.
So much more. And that's very, very common because, whether it's a cat, a dog, or a blue jay, I mean, whatever it is, that creature, or in your case, a bunny, that creature has been your source of comfort.
Right.
Your source of comfort and connection. And suddenly that's gone. And that can be the avalanche that really hits you. That it's not only all of the losses, it's my buddy is not here anymore. So I've definitely seen that many times, to have it be the loss of the animal companion. I hate the word pet. Animal companion that sends folks to seek help. So thank you for that wonderful piece of insight. Jenny, did you have stuff?
I was just going to piggyback off of one of the comments that says the aha moment has been the focal point of my curiosity, and the daily where do I go from here each time a new level has been discovered. That's been my experience in my grief journeys, evolution, path, exploration, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I know now I kind of joke about it, but I'm very serious about it. When things start going crazy and I'm feeling out of control again, because that happens often.
Yeah.
I actually get excited about it, even though I'm in the midst of fire and stress and overwhelm and and yelling at the kids. But I actually get excited about it because I know that's my way of preparing to level up. That's me saying, oh, okay, I'm about to go up to the next level or experience something new or grow another way. So I
Yeah.
actually get excited in a weird, demented sort of way.
Demented is not a word I would use for you, my friend. So, but yeah, I mean, we have to know ourselves well enough to know what all of our own internal workings are. And that's a huge part of doing this work is the caveat is when you notice that your own stuff is getting in the way of helping your clients. And so that's when, I call that you have to clean out your own pot, because you can't serve others from a dirty pot. You wouldn't have people over to your house for dinner and serve them out of a dirty pot. And this is your emotional stew. You have to have a clean, your internal world needs to be as clean as possible so that you can truly be of service. So that is our ongoing challenge, and that is our responsibility, to be able to be as client focused as possible, because our clients deserve that, because they've already had so many other obstacles in their way. So yeah, thank you for those insights. I'm just gonna get over to, yes, the demystifying. These are the things that run through our own heads, and sometimes they usually come from things that we're taught, whether it's directly taught or indirectly taught, the beliefs that we have internally. So I wanted to put the myth out there as well as the actual truth. And the number one thing is, I'll never get over this. And it's one of those phrases, getting over it, getting over this, that I would love to take a linguistic X-Acto knife and just remove that phrase from our lexicon. It does so much damage. The goal is not to get over this. The goal is to get better and to heal and to get some peace and to develop some tools so that it doesn't wipe you out quite as hard the next time life pulls the rug out from under you. And so that it doesn't take over your every waking moment and disrupt every cell in your body, which is how it can feel initially. That you get back to a homeostasis, back to your center, right? This is another one of my big bugaboos. Time will just heal. Time heals all wounds. I'll just need to wait. Waiting longer. See previous discussion about people coming to the process 10 or 20 years later. Waiting longer does not somehow magically help. It can ease the shock. And sometimes people mistake that for actual healing stuff. But for most people, there needs to be an active and proactive addressing of the grief, the trauma, the suffering, the pain, whatever is in your way that is keeping you from your peace. It needs to be actively pursued, not just waited for, because it's not just going to drop out of the sky. So the 5 stages of grief I always mention, because there's a tremendous amount of misunderstanding about that. The stages of grief were not written for grievers. They were written for the dying. But because there were no other tools for the grievers to use when the 5 stages were first made public, it was sort of transposed into the grieving world. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote those, spent about the last decade of her life trying to put the genie back in the bottle and say, no, that's not what I meant. Too late. It's already out. And it's not that those stages aren't true. There is anger, there is bargaining, there is acceptance, and acceptance is a piece of it, but they're not enough, is one issue. The stages are not linear. We go crisscrossing back and forth many, many, many times in our healing journey. And again, that applies to both grief and trauma. If you've got trauma that you're recovering from, you may go through many of those stages and many other ones in addition. And you go back and forth and criss and cross. And so it's not a straight line of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, and then I'm done. No, not really. You can't be quote unquote done because your loss or your trauma has changed you. So that's just the truth of it. And there's a lot of wisdom in the approach of David Kessler, who says there's a 6th stage. And David Kessler worked with Dr. Kubler-Ross towards the end of her life. He's kind of the heir apparent for grief healing. And he says there's actually a 6th stage, which is creating meaning out of what has happened. And that applies to pretty much everything, whether it's a loss or a trauma, how to create meaning out of what's happened and how to make the most of what you have. So because it's true, and I sort of flipped the order on this, but yes, that's true. Your life will not be the same after this, but that's okay. Life changes all the time, and we have to adapt and we have to reinvent so that we are having a life of service. So we are having a life of joy and good things and not as much suffering, so that the suffering doesn't take over your psyche. And when you say, okay, I guess I get that, but I don't know what this healing therapy coaching thingamajiggy is going to look like. I don't understand because I've never had this before. That's okay. But that's your counselor's or coach's job to explain it and demystify the process and answer any question that you have. You have to be in an environment where there are no dumb questions to make it feel more doable and to make it feel like you're not dealing with it all alone. Because when we're in our own heads, that is when we often feel most alone. So, did either of you want to add to either of those categories?
I have to say, I totally and completely agree with you in terms of you don't get over it. You don't ever get over it. You learn to live with it, is what I always like to say. You learn how to live with it. And I think the thing that helped me the most when I was going through it myself in support groups and counseling was the idea that originally, like when you first have a grief episode or something happens, it's this big, huge thing that's right in front of you. So it's like right in front of you. You can't get around it. You can't get over it. It just literally is blocking you. But then every day as you heal, that big block becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until one day you're walking and it's next to you and you're holding its hand, so to speak, but it's with you still. But you're walking along, but then one day you realize it's maybe this big and you're holding it, but then the next day you realize it's small enough you can fold it up, and you fold it up and you put it in your pocket. And as you keep walking on the journey, you may put your hand in your pocket and you'll feel that it's still there, but ultimately you can take your hand out of your pocket at some point and continue walking, and you kind of forget that it's there, but it'll always be in your pocket. It'll always be there for you to touch and remember. But the idea in the grief journey is to get to the point where you have healed enough that it isn't impeding you anymore. It's not blocking you, but it's always going to be part of you. It's part of your history. It's part of your life. So it's always going to be part of what you have experienced. It's your life history, your life story. So I agree. I hate that. Like, oh, you'll get over it. It'll just take time. No, there's no getting over it. So totally agree with that.
Yeah. And it's also, we want to be careful with, oh, you'll never get over it. That can feel kind of helpless,
right?
But it's more of, it's a very fine line. But it does become part of your story,
part of your history. It's part of the story of who you are and where you've been.
Are. And exactly.
The good things and the bad things in your life. You have good things that are part of your history too. And, you tell those stories as well. And so these are just because there's good and bad in everything. And so these are the things that are not so good, but they're part of you. It's a part of who you become and what they make, what is made of you as a result of those experiences.
Exactly. I think we're lost Jenny for just a second. Sorry about that. Oops, we lost Jenny. That's okay. We will keep going, and she'll pop in whenever there she is. Okay, great.
Sorry, my internet's really laggy.
Laggy. Okie dokie.
Yeah. I was just going to add, it's so important to have a safe space to do your grief work.
So vital.
Like it can be, it's the difference. It can be a life and death difference. Sometimes even literally.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, if a space is detrimental to your grieving and your grieving process, then it can just put you back like 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
But if it is a safe space, then it can propel you forward to make leaps and bounds in your journey.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we often have to expand our definition of what a safe space looks like. And I mentioned a little bit about this yesterday, but it's something that I'm very passionate about, is that if you are a member of a marginalized community, you may not be able to find a safe space. If you belong to a different religion, if you belong to the gay community, the LGBTQ community, if you come from a poly family, if you have just any sort of different background, some of the mainstream stuff may not work for you. And so it's a question of finding the space where you don't feel like you have to hide any piece of your story. I'm just thinking of someone in my practice right now who lost somebody very close to them, but the group that they have found is helpful to a point, but she has not felt comfortable sharing that the person that she lost was gay. And so that means that there's a big chunk of the equation where she can't get help in that setting. So folks have to look for a combination of things to see what works for them. So I'll run a group for, folks who come from different religions, non-mainstream approaches, non-mainstream family arrangements, because any sort of judgment is so detrimental to the grieving process, whether you're talking about grief or trauma of any kind, because we run into so much of it when we start asking for help, which leads quite nicely to my next slide, which is about stigma. And this not only applies to what I have on the screen, but so many other categories. But the biggest thing is asking for help is weak. And this breaks my heart, because it takes such extraordinary strength to tell your story sometimes. If you come from, if a loss is one category, but if you're talking about addiction, if you're talking about suicide, if you're talking about homicide, if you're talking about any sort of thing that folks are like maybe be judging and saying, oh, well, but you shouldn't have done that. And, all the things that get in your way. So it takes a lot of courage to rise above that and actually ask. It is an extraordinary inner heft that it can take. And when you finally find the courage to ask and then get slapped down, it is profoundly damaging to the process. So if you're talking about someone who's a rape survivor or an incest survivor, all of those things where, you say those words sometimes and you can feel that people get instantly uncomfortable. And no, but this is the reality. This is what people are dealing with. And you can't have that energy coming at that. If someone has the guts to walk into, whether it's an individual office or into a group situation, and say, I'm in recovery, or I'm a rape survivor, or any of the really hard things that folks deal with, they have to be welcomed. They have to be not judged in any way, shape, or form. And I'm really, that's a big one for me. I hear all the time, therapy? Oh, that's for crazy people. I don't use the word crazy about anybody under any circumstances in this context. It is so damaging because it can make you feel crazy. This process can make you feel crazy, but that's not the same thing. And all of the stuff that is making you feel that way is because you're hurt and because you're suffering and because you're trying to figure it out and you don't see the path. That's what makes us feel crazy. But I always urge folks to just don't live in that space. Keep reaching for help. Keep reaching for help. Oh, but I'm not worthy of help. Hold on. Why would that be? You are a child of the universe. You are a child of God. However you phrase that, you are here. This is your journey. And as far as we know, we get one. So let's make it as good as possible. You got stuff in your way? That's okay. Let's talk about it and be able to talk about anything. Sometimes the stigma comes from within the family. The asking for help is weak. You're crazy. Therapy is crazy. Or if you need something more than your family or your faith, then you're somehow betraying your family. Like, I'm not saying I'm not going to use those tools, but I'm still confused. I'm still lost. I need more than that. That is not a betrayal. That is trying to find your path in a very dark place. So my question would be, is the price of receiving love that you continue to suffer? If that makes sense. Because that equation seems very off to me. And again, life will never be the same. That's true, that we have to adapt and reinvent. And there are so many other stigmas that we could go into. I know one I have to stay strong for my kids. But your kids see that you're suffering. You think that they don't. But kids are way smarter than we think they are. They're going to pick up on that. They're going to pick up on the energy. They're going to pick up on, why is Dad so off? Why is he tossing things? Why is he not listening? They're going to know. They're going to know. That's not the strong that we're looking for. So yes, I wanted to ask if there were one or two other stigmas that either of you might be wanting to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, I think two for me strike me. One is kind of one you talked about already a little bit, which was my husband, my first husband. He passed away from an alcohol-related illness, and so, he was young. He was only 42. I was only 36, and so people would ask me, like, because of course everybody's so curious. What did he die from? Oh my God, he's so young. Could I die from that? So you get a lot of intrusive questions, and so. At first I didn't want to say, and then eventually I started to say, like, why should I be embarrassed? It's an addiction. It's an illness just like any other illness. So I would say this. And you right away could see the judgment on people. Oh, he was an alcoholic. Oh, okay.
Right. So does that mean he deserved to die?
Right,
I mean,
that's your fault. For
really? Wow.
So
that's terrible.
And I think some of it comes from people's perception that it can't happen to them. They don't like the thought that something traumatic can happen to them. So, if your husband was an alcoholic, then you made a bad choice as a spouse. And, so it's not going to happen to me. And then the other one was related to cancer, which is a very subtle one. But I had to call a doctor, and I did have a brain tumor as part of my cancer journey. And I
Yeah.
had to call a doctor about something. And I called and I said, I was looking to set up an appointment. And the person on the phone was like, and it was brain related. And she was like, oh, okay. What insurance do you have? And she was very curt and snotty, for lack of a better word. And I said, I have, whatever, I have this insurance. And she goes, is that through the state? And I said, well, no, it's through my employer. Well, all of a sudden, her demeanor changed and her tone changed because, oh, this is someone who has private insurance. We're going to get paid better. They're going to be easier to work with. And so I just thought, wow, how horrible. Just because I think they just assume if you have a brain tumor and a brain illness, you're not productively working. And so they're going to have to deal with state medication or state insurance.
Right.
And they found out they didn't have to. They were all friendly and nice to me then. And I thought, wow, that is so stigmatizing to someone because their insurance is insurance. Like, I'm still a human being and I should be treated as such, regardless of my insurance status.
Well, and that gets into so many other layers of stigma that get intertangled. You cannot pull apart mental health, racism, poverty, any kind of discrimination, socioeconomic status, your job. Don't get me started on insurance. That'll take another hour. And I only have another hour. So, but yeah, I mean, all of these things just get in the way. So it's not as Dee says in the comments, we need to destigmatize society, which is not something that can be done overnight, but it has to be chipped away at because the consequences are just massive. They're just massive. Jen, did you have a brief thing you want to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay. No, it comes from, it can come from family. It can come from friends. It can come from work. It can come from culture. It can come from media. I'm just remembering, not so much about the mental health piece, but I took a number of weeks off when my stepmother died because I was trying to keep my family together and there were so many moving pieces and it was insane. And I burned through my bereavement days. I burned through all my days off. I lost track of all my time off. And I went to HR at my job and I said, okay, help me straighten this out because I have no more brain. Can you help me figure out, do I have any days left? Are they all gone? And I got the nastiest look of, what do you mean you don't know? Like, because my stepmother just died and I've been trying to peel my father off the ceiling. I'm sorry, is that a problem? Do you not have a record? I mean, I was furious. So sometimes it certainly comes from our employment as well. So many stigmas. We can't even get to all of them. That's a whole other, PowerPoint. Then once we work through to that point of, then we can get help, right? That shouldn't be a 1, that should be a 5. Please ignore that. But not all help is created equal. And I found it very helpful to work with someone who is also a survivor and who will talk about it and not keep it hidden. There are many traditional therapists who only will talk about your stuff and refuse to share any personal pieces. And that can be very unsettling because you're not really sure if they get it. And I've talked about this often. I spent a lot of time in my own healing journey talking to a counselor who was very earnest and had their fancy degrees on the wall and, had a perfectly matched 3-piece suit every time I saw her and had no idea what I was talking about. There was no light of understanding in her eyes. And the moment I realized that, I left her practice, because I just said, you've no bloody idea what I'm talking about, do you? And it was very disappointing. And I just, because that connection of validation and understanding is huge, absolutely huge, because most of us have already been rejected many, many times. And so finding that bond is really important. I would also say, be wary of folks who have easy answers about grief and trauma. These things take a lot of time, a lot of diligence, and just because somebody has fancy degrees doesn't mean they make a good counselor. Listening, empathy, training, and patience. And there are many more traits that make the healing equation work best. And so those are why I created the taper technique. So it's the challenges of when we are ready, but now what? Who do I ask? Whom do I trust? What do I look for? What do I do if it's not working? Because I run across this all the time, of folks who say, oh yeah, I've been in counseling. I've got a therapist. Oh, okay, great. How's that going? I don't know. Okay. Is it helping? I don't know. Might want to rethink that. Why isn't it helping? And what do we do now? Now, I never suggest that somebody leave their therapist, but it's really a question of what's working. And sometimes you work in Congress with other practitioners of different kinds, and that's fine too. The point is, are you getting any better? Are you learning anything? And that's the key. So I wanted to ask, any thoughts on that before we get into the taper technique? Or not, that's okay too.
It's such a good, so important to find your person, whether that's a therapist, a counselor, a coach, a partner, a pet.
Yeah.
I mean, a companion, a furry companion,
Yes.
or not furry companion. So that, again, it's, if you don't have a right fit, it can be very detrimental to your journey. With the
It
right fit,
stops you in the tracks. Yeah, it stops you in your
it makes
tracks.
everything.
Yeah, it makes everything. Exactly.
And when
Exactly.
I was in therapy, you hear my dryer or washer thunking around, so sorry about that. When I was in therapy, my first therapist was excellent. She was like a mom. She wrapped me up in her blanket. She let me sleep on her couch. And
Oh,
that was exactly what I needed at that time.
yeah.
And it was good until it wasn't. And that's when
Yeah.
I knew, okay, now it's time to move on.
Yeah.
I don't,
Right.
she's not teaching me anything. She's anything more.
Exactly.
She's not helping me go farther
Yeah.
the way
That's
that I
exactly
need
the
to.
key. That's exactly the key. And it's nice that you mentioned the mom part, because and somebody actually just commented to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that I have some clients who call me Mama Bear, and I take that with, I'm very proud of that. Mama Bear Claire is in the house, and because I take care of my people, and I get very tweaked when other people don't. So that's that's very personal to me, and I'm very proud of that, and strive to be that. Because Mama Bear has to be warm and welcoming and with a lot of advice, but sometimes the big paw needs to come across and go, no, 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 boink, don't do that, don't do that, please don't do that. Let's do better.
Yeah.
Let's do better. So it's insisting, but it's loving.
Yeah. It's interesting. My next therapist is somebody that I would never have imagined that I would be working with. So I'm very, very spiritual, very religious. And this therapist is a male about my age. His family of origin is Jewish. and he's a pronounced agnostic. So
Okay.
I never would have imagined
Yeah, but it's about
that
the
I
character.
would.
It's about the person, right? You
It
got to
totally
have
is.
that connection. There's got to be that clink, that click, that where you just, when you go, oh, good, okay, I am heard, I am understood, I get it, I have some things that I can move forward with. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the key right there.
Yeah.
So,
and I think we have to remember that, we're paying, so to speak, them. And so if
yeah,
the fit isn't right, it's okay. Just like if you had a contractor and they were doing some work and eventually you said, you know what, this isn't exactly what I want. You have to feel comfortable saying, this isn't just the right fit. You're not going to hurt their feelings. If they're a good therapist, you're not going to hurt their feelings. You're not going to offend them. You have the right to pick and choose who you want to work with. So it's always important.
I have clients who say, I hope this doesn't offend you. I'm like, offend me? It better not, because I shouldn't be doing this. If no, please don't worry about that. It's fine.
Exactly.
So yeah, absolutely. So I'm very excited about this next piece. Thank you both again. Which is, I thought really long and hard about this. I came to this during lockdown. What is it that we need to succeed? So I hope y'all are taking notes, because this is, I love this piece. These are the pieces that I find between the counselor and the client. What works? What has to be in place? And so we're going to walk through each of these. Don't worry. I know that looks like a lot, but we're going to break it all down. The biggest things is the tools. It's the how. And that's the means by which you participate. What do I do? Actively having tools that you can use. And these are the building blocks that need to be crafted with each individual. And there's dozens of them. But the counselor has to take the time to talk to each person and say, how are you wired? What have you tried before? There is absolutely no point in suggesting a piece of something that somebody's tried 6 times before and they're already like, nah, that doesn't work for me. So it's a question of taking, and that's why I said be careful of folks who within the first 1 or 2 sessions are already going, oh, you just need to do this. Well, hold on a minute. It takes some time to learn how somebody is wired. And it would sort of be like somebody saying to me, oh, you just need a bowl of spaghetti. I have celiac. I need gluten-free spaghetti. So unless you're going to take the time to know what's going on with me, or did you want green peppers or red peppers? I hate green peppers. Never touch them. Long story. But this takes some time to get into what I call the niggly bits of who someone is. Because by the time they get to my door, they've already been through a whole host of things, and they deserve the attention that's going to actually work, tools that are actually going to work. I'm a huge fan of journaling. I almost always offer that piece. But it's so important to find what works for that individual, because the most important work that happens is between the sessions. It's not only in that 60 or 90 minutes that we're talking. You've got dozens of hours between sessions where you're just going to go back in your own head. If you don't have the tools, you also have to use the tools. That's kind of important. Use the tools that we're building. And that's where the change happens. Any thoughts on tools, my friends?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the journaling. That's a huge help for folks, and it doesn't even have to be on paper. You in this day and age, you can do electronic. You can do a lot of different things, but it's definitely the tools that you have. help you in the periods of time when you're not actively in a session. Totally agree.
Exactly. And so because it's about that process of getting the things out of your head. And there's a big difference, I find, actually. Some people do journaling in their phone. Some people do it on a computer. Some people, I'm the biggest fan of, an actual pen and paper. And I tell people, use pen, not paper, because I don't want you changing things. If you're changing it, there's something we got to talk about there. So pen and paper, it's a different part of your brain than typing on a computer or typing on your phone. So I always tell people, try different ways and let's see how that goes. But the important thing is to take it out of your head and put it in front of you so that we can examine it and read it and take it apart, process it, put it back together in a way that works better for you. Because it's all about examination. It's all about examination. So how do we do that? But there's so many. I couldn't even list all of the tools that after 15 years of doing this work, how many tools that I could bring to bear for a client. And I often invent new ones because it's exactly. I see these tools are the stepping stones to healing. Exactly. But you gotta use them. You gotta walk them for them to actually help. But that's one of my questions when somebody says, I haven't been to this therapist or I have been to this therapist for 5 years, 8 years, whatever. I say, well, are they giving you things to do, things to think about? Are they giving you tools to use, tools to change, to create change in your life? Oh, no, really. They just ask you how you feel and just make a list of things and then say, okay, time's up. That'll be, where's my fee? And I'll see you next week. I'm not sure that's helping.
That's actually a really important point because, literally one of the best therapists I went to many, many years ago, one of the things we did was we had definite goals and we talked about them. We talked about them when we set them and we talked about them at the next session. And for me, that was very helpful. And because if it was just coming to talk for an hour, you didn't feel like there was any forward progress, but having goals, and sometimes you didn't meet the goals and it was okay. But having something concrete for me was a very important part of the healing journey. If I didn't have those stepping stones to move forward, I just kind of, okay, so I sit here and talk about how sad I am every time. That's not going to move me anywhere.
Exactly. Jenny, did you have anything to pop in for, or are you good? And oh shoot, there she went again. Well, a little bookmark in that. We'll come back to Miss Jenny. I just want to pop into the next piece because the question becomes, having the tools is great, but what if I start using them and then I trail off and then I set them aside and then I kind of forget about them? So what's the next step? This is absolutely key, is accountability. With all learning, regular appointments and check-ins is central to your comfort and to your progress. Some folks are able to self-direct or do it when they're learning something or doing a task, but healing from grief and trauma can be so emotional and exhausting and daunting that having a guide is the one thing that can make a difference between true relief and staying in your suffering. And so when someone has something big on their agenda that they want to work on, but they say, so can we meet like once a month? I'm like, my experience is that's not going to shift you, because that's 1 hour among several hundred hours that, the old patterns are just going to come back. So it's by the diligent process, not only of doing the work, but having someone that you're accountable to, that you have to look at the next session and go, yeah, I didn't do that. Oh, did you cover the journal topics we talked about? Did you do that worksheet? Did you watch that video? Did you read that book? Nope. Well, let's talk about that. Why is that? So it's having someone to hold you to the mark. I have a feeling you have something to say about this, Miss Jenny. Yes, we all need someone. Yes.
Accountability is key. Actually, I do have clients who work with me once a month, but they do a lot of work on their own between sessions. So it doesn't have to be necessarily external accountability. If you're a personality type that has your own accountability, if you're your own accountability partner, fantastic.
Yes.
But if you're not, then you need regular sessions.
Yeah.
Like more a month.
Yeah. Yeah. So there needs to be a system, and it doesn't necessarily, like I said, it doesn't have to be external, but some folks are self-directed. Most of the time with these big topics, the big painful stuff, folks need something that's more regular. Yeah. Nodding yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced those big traumatic. Well, I have.
Yeah.
And I was I was texting with my therapist all the way through it. Like even more than once a day. I was in he was there with me all the way through it.
Yeah, exactly.
So just make sure when you're choosing your therapist that they fit with you, they have the accountability, and they have that they have your back.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes actually in one of my later steps. You're absolutely right.
Sorry, spoiler alert.
That's okay. You're ahead of me. Because the next piece is actually, so we get started in the process and we commit to regular sessions, but then we hit a wall and big emotions come up, and that's a lot of people get freaked out by that and stop. So that's why the P in taper is permission. I give you permission to start the healing process and to move forward without guilt. That is the beginning of the whole thing, is to start, just to start. But I also give you permission to feel every single emotion that you have. Go there. It's okay. Even the messy ones, especially the messy ones that you're not supposed to have, that you're not supposed to be angry, guilty, regretful, anything that comes up. Whatever your truth is, that's where the healing has to come. So, and that's what takes you through, is being that's part of that safe space, is that you have permission to have those ugly feelings, that you will not get judged in that space, to go there deeply and truly to bring them to the surface so that they can be worked on. And I give you permission to heal, even though you are without your loved one. You get to move your life forward and learn to grieve fearlessly, which is actually the name of my grief and trauma healing program, which we're going to talk about at the end. And that supports the end goal, which is learning how to grieve fearlessly. So I think that's a huge thing, as we're always told. It's one of those stigma things. You're not supposed to feel that way. Well, but we do. And denying that is going to keep you stuck. So I always appreciate that that piece of honesty, and that door has to be open. So, and I'm just going to skip a bit to the next one, because we start that work and we start to feel, but then the whole process starts to feel hard and heavy. So what makes actual change? And that is another step-by-step process. And that's E is for evidence. So we may have been taught that healing from grief and trauma is not doable, but it's not only not true, it's that belief is really lacking in kindness or compassion. Kindness for yourself, compassion for yourself, and compassion for others. Because when you actually are doing the work and are walking this path, you will feel your heart lighten. And most people don't believe that until they experience that, until that moment where they feel whew, some of the weight comes off. Oh, that's better. Oh man, I can breathe again. Okay, good. So that relief can be immediate, and the more you apply yourself, the easier it gets. And the more you practice, the better you get at it, just like anything else. So you can see it's just like learning an instrument or trying a recipe or anything. Is you're not going to know it right at the get-go. Of course you're not. That's okay. But when you do feel that relief, or when you do find the tool that works, believe the evidence that it works. Believe the evidence that you are more powerful than you think. So I think that's a huge, huge piece. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that is huge. I think, when working with the support groups, the bereavement support groups, what we saw were people, when they would laugh for a day, and then they would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting my loved one. If I was able to laugh today, if I was able to enjoy myself and not think about them for a half an hour, that must mean I'm forgetting them. And we'd have to give them permission to say, no, that's evidence that you're healing. That you can continue to keep this person's memory in your heart and your mind, but that you can still enjoy life. Life is still going on for you. You are still here. And evidence that you can enjoy life again is important for you to see, because so many people feel like they're betraying their loved one if they're having fun, if they're laughing, if they're not thinking about them every waking moment of the day. Does that mean they're forgetting about them, or they're not honoring their memory? And no, we say that's evidence of healing. That's evidence of healing.
Absolutely. And I want to use the same piece as far as trauma healing is concerned. If you come from a background of abuse and violence and neglect, you may not really believe that there's anything more for you, and that you're stuck in that dark place. And so when you start to see the light come through, there's a new piece of truth that you may not have been aware of. And that's what you want to grab onto, not run away from. I always refer back to really one of my favorite quotes that I don't remember a time when I didn't know this quote, and it blew me away when I first saw it. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And it's such a piece of wisdom, and it's a lyric by Leonard Cohen. And if you don't know Leonard Cohen, look him up. It is that our cracks are where we can let the light in. And so that doesn't mean you're cracked. It means that the possibility for light is always there. But as long as we keep the walls up, and as long as we stay in the dark, we're not believing the evidence. So I find that that's a truly key piece of being willing to shift your preconceived idea that you are stuck in this dark place. And maybe that's all you've ever known, because this is another one of my catchphrases. People only know what they know. If all that you've known is suffering, if all that you've known is marginalization, if all that you've known is damage and rejection, that's what you think your world is. It's not. There is more. There is something bigger and kinder and more accepting that is out there. And finding the path to that is key to our survival. So that's why that evidence piece is so, so, so important. If that's all that you've ever seen, how would you know? But when you see those pieces, that's new. I want to go over there. I want to explore that. That feels much better to me than this ugly that I come from. That's been a huge process for me from my dark ugly, is realizing I kept seeing other families and other situations where I said, well, they've got something different. Huh. I wonder how I get there. And that's what's driven me for 35 years, is how do I get to those better places? So that's a huge piece for me. Anything for you, Miss Jenny?
Tons, but I'm writing because I'm taking notes. That's how I process. I'm a note taker.
Yep, same.
So yeah, there's tons of stuff coming up. I was with one of my podcast guests was Kelly Nielsen, and she was talking about how her experience when her mom died by suicide, and then like a short time later, her son died by overdose, accidental, or it was by overdose, and she was talking about how she was in such a dark place when her mom died that she couldn't figure out where to even make sense or where to start. She thought she was going to be in that dark place forever. She couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then she was able to go to somebody else's speaker who was, I believe, Rwandan genocide survivor. And the speaker was up there, alive, vibrant, telling her story. And that's when Kelly said, if she can survive that, I can survive this.
Yes.
So it's so important to share our stories and like share our own stories and be observant and explore other people's stories and be open to the light, wherever that light comes from. Yes,
absolutely. It's one of the tools that I will recommend to folks who are in that dark place and believe that that's all that there is the world is full of role models who are survivors. And there more and more people these days are talking about their mental health struggles or talking about their survivor stories. And I think that's incredibly valuable to show folks that if they did it, I can do it too. And, that's pretty much most of my role models growing up, but certainly to this day that is the truth. If this human being can do it, then this human being can do it. And their path may not be the same as yours, but the path is out. So people survive extraordinary things. So it's doable. Folks just need the how. Yeah. So I'm going to just get to the last slide here on the taper technique, which is reassurance. Is that having someone to come to with doubts and fears and questions and everything that makes you feel like you're going crazy is absolutely crucial, because that solid support is priceless. You got to be able to have somebody say, tell me anything. It's okay. I've got you. To be heard, to be validated, to be reassured that you are okay. Wherever you start is okay, and that you're going to be okay. How that okay looks may not look like what you think, and that's also okay. You're not wrong for feeling what you feel. You're not wrong for having questions. Ask anything. And it's okay that this takes time. Time gets very warped in this process. And so many of us have experienced that over the last 2 years, where time is very twisted up because of COVID, because of quarantines. A lot of us folk feel like we've lost some time. I keep saying last year, and suddenly realize, oh, that's 2020. That's 2 years ago. Well, 2020 and 2021 sort of globbed together in my brain as 1 year, but somehow it's 2 years. I still can't figure it out, but it's that thing where trauma, which we've all been through, this collective trauma of COVID, and we're still in it, it plays havoc with your sense of time. And so when we come to the healing process, we want time to make sense. I talk about in my book, by the way, I have a book. We're going to talk about that at the end too. When my mother died, I went to a friend of mine, and I lost my mom when I was 25. So I didn't have a lot of other friends who lost their parents yet. So I had to seek those out very actively. I went to a friend of mine and I said, how long does this take exactly? I mean, exactly. I wanted an answer, 287 days. I'm like, no, because everything went so slowly. And yet, so we have this bizarre sense of this just happened, but it's still happening, but it was also a long time ago. So the calendar kind of doesn't make sense. And we've all been thrown into that in the last couple of years. It's very, very ungrounding. And so being able to find your way back to that is completely key, completely key. So when I said, I asked my friend, how long will this take? And she said, well, give it a year. And I went, a year? Are you nuts? I can't even, what? My head exploded. I had no concept of what she was talking about. That just felt like unattainable. And so I didn't have a framework for that. So the passage of time gets very strange. And so people want things to work quickly, but they don't. And anything worth doing is worth taking the time to do well. So I encourage folks, don't worry about the time. Do it until we feel better, until we find the tools that work for you and how to get you to a better place. And we'll know it when we get there. Oh, I'm better. Huh. Weird. Good. Weird. Also good, but also weird. It's kind of both because we don't always see it happening. But that goes back to the evidence. When you do feel better, that weight comes off and you feel like you have more space in your brain and more space in your heart so that you can move forward from whatever you've been through. So that's the last piece in the taper technique. I have a few more closing ideas, but I wanted to just ask the two of you what your thoughts are on the taper sequence, and does this make sense for a healing approach?
I love it. I love it. And it makes
Cool.
like it's total, like that's what I use too, but I've never consolidated it into the taper technique, and I love it.
Yeah,
I agree 100%. Like it makes so much sense, but I've never thought about it this way. But when explaining it to other people, like, yes, total and complete sense.
Yes. Awesome. Very cool. Yeah. So this, but that's exactly why is, we've thought about all these things as practitioners, but putting it in, these acronyms and snippets makes it easier to explain, because this is such a massive stumbling block of how to get something that actually works. And I think these are 5 of the key pieces that really, they have to be in place for ourselves and for what we receive from the process, between the pyramid, which is the internal steps we need to take, and then the taper technique, which is what the process needs to be in place to lead actually to success in healing, where you can finally go, oh, okay, I can breathe again. Or I can breathe, period. I have a sense of peace that I've never known before. And we deserve that. We deserve that. No matter what kind of ugly we come from, we deserve that. But here's the kicker. His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, says the happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. Action is what changes things. Action is what shapes your path. Waiting will not do it. Staying stuck in our preconceived ideas and letting other people's stigmas hold us back will not do it. So how long will we go on before we actually reach for the healing that we need? It's an inescapable truth that we are the architects of our path forward. So many times the grief and trauma that we come from was thrown at us by someone else or thrown at us by life. And, you know, sometimes it's cancer, sometimes it's an accident, sometimes it's somebody else's garbage that gets thrown on your shoes. It is so often not of our making. But your healing is absolutely of your making. And it is so possible. And the most important work of our lives is that relationship to ourselves and how we move through life. And just to reiterate, you're not crazy. Some crazy things may have happened. You may feel a little crazy. That's the emotional roller coaster that you're on. But you are hurt and you are scared. You may be lost, but you are never alone if you reach for help. So it's such a powerful piece that we've all got stuff. And we can't avoid it. As a matter of fact, I know so many people who have that in their past, or they say for their kids, oh, I don't want them ever to have any hardship. I don't want them to have the hardship that I did. I don't want them to have to struggle. I get that. But stuff's going to happen. Life's going to happen. And sometimes it's, you know, you're going to lose your job. Sometimes it's somebody's going to break your heart. Sometimes it can be things that are much worse. But if nobody struggles, you have nothing to learn. You don't, when those things happen, you won't have the tools. And I've seen that time and time again, that, you know, it's not that our struggles happen for a reason. I quibble with that really intensely. Well, this terrible thing happened for a reason. No. It's what we do out of our struggles that create the reason. Can you imagine how much, there's so many things that people do that come out of their struggles. When you think of someone who comes out of poverty and rises to the top of their profession, or become a billionaire, or make offerings to make the world a better place, invent things, create things, educate people, be of service, it is much more than what we come from. So I have some, I always say I learn way more from my clients than they do from me. But they blow me away every single time that I have a session. I'm always blown away by their courage and their insistence on that healing journey. And some of them have been through some things that I've not seen. Oh boy, it's a lot. It's a lot. But they step up and they step in and they show up and they do the work, and it blows me away. And one of the things that I have been very insistent on is finding more ways to do that and to create things for their healing journey. This is my 6-month online grief and trauma healing program. It is intensive. It is amazing. And it can change your everything very quickly, because it is a lot of personal attention, assignments in your email, lots of affirmations, worksheets, videos, everything. Weekly sessions from me, daily text support, not tech support, although if you need that too. But it is active, it is engaged, and it is a real partnership between me and the client to really build a solid foundation to get to the rest of your life with a lot more peace and a lot more understanding, with the tools that you're going to need to build your resilience to get you through whatever else comes across your path. And so any conference participant or anybody who watches this video in the future, I'm offering $100 off. So you just need to shoot me an email and let me know if you want to plug into that, or at least have a conversation about it and see if it's for you. So, and then there's my book, which I hope is clear on the page. Here it is on, oops, and I skipped, that's all right. We're just going to review all my slides. That's okay. We'll go through the taper, and there we go. There's my book, which I'll just show you on camera. It is Putting Out the Fire. It talks about the first week of loss and how folks can deal with that. It's something that I never found when I was looking for my own healing pieces. Just that right from that phone call, right from that moment of, oh my God, my life will not be the same. What do I do? And so those are the moving pieces that I deal with. The practical side, the emotional side, who can help you, who you probably shouldn't have helping you, and how to move forward into the long term of healing from grief. And it doesn't actually only apply to grief. I've had trauma survivors read this as well. And this is also on my website. And so if that is of interest to you, please let me know. And you can shoot me an email, or you can find it on my website. And that's also at a discount as well. Although if you need it shipped overseas, please email me so I make sure that it gets to you. So there's all of that. So, my friends, ladies, any closing thoughts, any ideas, any questions, anything you think I missed, anything strange or weird, or anything that you want to bring up?
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it was excellent. Very insightful, very helpful. Lots of tidbits that I certainly can take away. So great job. Fabulous.
Cool. I appreciate it. I'm so grateful to the two of you for hopping in and sharing your stories. That's community is key with these things. So finding folks we can connect to is kind of priceless. So here's all of my contact information, my websites, where you can find my book, my blog. Blog has all sorts of free information on there. If you want to pop into my schedule, you can make an appointment for a free consultation with me. That's easy to do. My program is also detailed on there, Fearless Grieving to Fearless Living. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, maybe coming soon. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And that's my main email right there, miriamswellhealing@gmail.com. So here's what I want to say to you. You are more than your losses and your trauma. Life is an amazing gift. Don't waste it in your suffering, because there's a way out. And maybe it's not me. That's okay. But keep asking. Keep seeking. Don't live in the dark. It's a beautiful day. Go find your beautiful day, because you deserve that, because you are here on this earth, and every day is precious. And today will never come again. What are you going to do with that? So that's my closing thought to you. do reach out. If you've got questions, happy to help. And even if you don't reach out to me, it's all good. Reach for help. Reach for help. And reinvention is an extraordinary thing to witness if you are lucky enough to be close to it. So awesome and wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was a long class, but it went really fast. So I'm really grateful for that. And grateful to my amazing colleagues, amazing, powerful, kind, compassionate women. And, on we go from here. So until we meet, please take excellent care of yourselves. I wish you well. I wish you blessings. Please take care. Thank you so much. Be well.